So to my left is Adrian Foley, who I was going to call an industry legend, but that implies that you're old. So he prefers to be called an evolving industry legend, who's really, or he doesn't even prefer to be called that. I'm going to call him that.
Just scratch the legend.
Scratch the legend.
That's
Actually,
way smarter.
Two of the 5 minutes are for the F-bombs he's going to drop during this. 'Cause he usually does that too.
I promise I won't interrupt or swear.
Yeah.
Oh, I will swear. I probably will swear.
All right. And I was asking Lisa Parrish earlier, who runs the Nationals, about how many times did Brookfield Residential win a National Design Award, and she said there's too many to count. So a real industry design legend who during the last cycle pivoted the company in California more towards land because things were getting tough as a home builder. And now he's part of Brookfield Development Group.
The development group of Brookfield Properties.
Brookfield Properties. Brookfield Asset Management is the most complicated company you can imagine. There's actually, I think, 5 or 6 publicly traded companies in there. But he oversees Brookfield Residential and also this new group, a relatively new group that I'm calling them new, Brookfield Development. And Brookfield did this little thing a couple years ago. They bought 165, I said 100 earlier, but it's actually 165 retail centers from General Growth Properties. Adrian said the quick math on it is it's about 150 million square feet of retail. And we all know how retail is changing. On about 450 million square feet of land. So there's about 300 million square feet, I'll call it parking space. And we heard earlier today about how the parking space is probably going to be reused at some point. So talk about an opportunity going forward. Adrian's the president and COO of the whole thing. So I have a couple questions for Adrian I gave ahead of time, but I want to open it up a little bit for Q&A too. And that's kind of an interesting.
I like that, yeah.
Somebody's got the Chargers logo up on the screen in front of us. So let's start with a little bit of background information, then we'll get to the current stuff. So if you could highlight one master plan or new home community you've built whose designs you're most proud of, what would it be and why?
So I think of it in sort of from two perspectives. One at the micro, a small community that my old friends at Taylor Woodrow, I know Tom Rebwitz is in the audience, that we built in Carlsbad called Marfiori at Aviara. And the other one would be Playa Vista. And for very different reasons. So Marfiori, 1995, 96. Just really beautiful architecture. Bob Heide did it. The details on every home in the community were just exquisite. And I personally was involved, so I take great pride personally in the development. But just a difficult development site, beautiful architecture, exquisite details, all for $42 a foot. And $42 a foot in 1990. Now sounds ridiculous, but in 1995 was equally as challenging, a little easier, but equally as challenging. But I remember designing door knockers and the hardware that went on the door. To the other extreme would be Playa Vista, where the company Brookfield picked up the balance of what was about 2,600 residential units in phase 2 at Playa Vista, and had a whole canvas of architecture to work on. Sort of repositioned some Barry Burkus designs, not knocking Barry, but they really weren't what we thought was future-looking or forward-looking, and introduced this really fresh sort of contemporary architecture with a unique design, 4,500 square foot homes on 3,500 square foot lots that sold for about $950 a foot. Just put that math together. It was a really successful design story, frankly, for the balance of the master plan. So those would be my two.
So let me just follow up on that. So how do you go into a new community designed by an architect legend and say, this isn't right, I'm going to try something else? Like where does that come from, and how much confidence did you have in that?
Well, first of all, it's a team, and I'm one very small opinion in a room of large, smart opinions. But ultimately, as the sort of developer quarterback, you've got to make sure you're picking the right decisions that are going to win, you hope. We never really loved the designs, candidly. Barry had got the concepts down, but a combination of reasons sort of left it that the aesthetic was a little clunky and a little unattractive, candidly, for us. So at the time, this sort of contemporary wave was gaining ground, and actually, from an architect's perspective, I know there's a bunch of you in the audience. We all love contemporary. I'm one of you. We all love contemporary designs. So when you're given the right budget and you're given the right canvas, it can be really effective. So we knew in Playa we had some room to play with.
So design trends were shifting, and it wasn't shifting with them, and you said we need to shift, basically.
Yeah, and phase one at Playa Vista, for those of you who've been out there, it's sort of a fruit salad of architectures, and it's a little. I always got a headache when I left there because I felt like some of the ideas were brilliant, some of them were less attractive. Phase two, I hope, when you go through there, it's a little more serene. It's more of a village of architecture as opposed to one particular theme or style, a multiple of themes or styles.
So this is kind of an advice to the audience question, but what lessons have you learned over the years that you keep with you every time you look at new designs?
Yeah, I sort of think of it in three ways. This is conscious for me all the time. I'm firmly of the belief, we are firmly of the belief, I should say, because it's a company sort of edict, that over-designing is actually fine, it's healthy. It's sort of like a work day. If we pack it full of shit, we'll get more done. And that's our thesis. So get as much architecture on the paper as you can. And then, yeah, we've got to get it into a budget, so that's the hard part. The second would be that, I don't want to say this, I don't want to say it crudely, but consumers generally...
You've already cussed once.
I know, I'm going to cuss probably 2 more times maximum. Right. But I think consumers generally don't know why they like something, but they fall in love with it. So you're the voice, you're the eyes, you're the heartbeat, you're the soul of the consumer. My crude term would be that I was told by Rob Elliott of the Irvine Company, only 3% of the population has taste. So just make sure, Adrian, you're in one of the 3%. And that, I think, is very true. Not that 3% is accurate, but I think the majority of consumers don't really know. So we've got to give them what they don't know they want. And then the third is that I don't mind only 5% of the market. We don't mind only 5% of the market liking what we've offered, as long as we're 100% of that 5% or a very high percentage of that 5%. And that's a bit of a cliche statement, but I think that's really true.
So how do you coach people to be in the 3%?
You coach them to be brave, do the research. You don't get there just by, your gut. You've got to do some homework, and you've got to have some substance behind your instinct.
So where do you do your homework?
We employ John Burns and Associates to do our real estate consulting, and
that's not true.
No, it is true.
Not enough, anyway.
It's not true. I think we have rigorous debates about what does that future home look like. We should have in our businesses. We encourage it. We encourage brave decisions as opposed to following. So I'd like to think that each of our groups, and I know we have a couple of 3 Brookfield team members in the audience, feel that they have the autonomy and authority to step forward and make a decision on behalf of the company. So we're brave with our decision making and don't mind being first. Okay.
So turning more to how the industry is changing, what industry disruptions do you think are occurring, and how are we going to need to change if they occur?
Yeah, you can get sort of carried away with this, or I find myself going down these rabbit holes of optimism, candidly, because I think of it as these as real positive disruptions. But so at Brookfield, you mentioned it earlier, we're a complicated business, but at our core on the real estate side, we're heavily invested in office, we're heavily invested in retail, and we're invested in hospitality. We're quite well invested in hospitality. So I can't think of 3 businesses that have been more disrupted over the last 10 years. From WeWork to Amazon to Airbnb, just 3 massive disruptors. So we've pursued those businesses in part because we think out of disruption comes opportunity, and at our core, we're real estate people. But we're also not naive to think that the living space, the residential space, isn't ripe for disruption. So the proxy for our industry is all the industries that have gone before it. We talked about affordability in the panel before, and by the way, some really cool ideas. But quite honestly, one of the most obvious things to us today with affordability is that a number of our homes, the shelter that we're providing, sit vacant for large periods of the year. We have a development in Nashville currently that if you give up your accommodation for 4 nights a month, we'll give you 40% back on your rent check. It's pretty amazing. If we could convert that into mortgages for sharing, so that you could buy one of our houses for 40% of its list price on the back of a sharing calculation or formula, you could design whatever you want, and we could afford it. Whatever you've got here, we deal with our, and I'm not going to make a sweeping statement, but maybe I am, but we would deal with our affordability issues overnight. Because actually, ironically, where there's demand for sharing is where there's massive affordability issues. So we are sitting on a goldmine of opportunity in our industry because, frankly, we haven't done much with it for the last 100 years, and there's this phenomenal opportunity of disrupting it. If we don't do it, or the smart people in this room and the industry leaders that we've got, we'll get disrupted by some company out there that's sitting out there in the wings that's thinking this is an amazing opportunity to take taxis and convert them onto your mobile phone and do the same thing with the home. So there is so much friction in buying and moving home right now. And there always has been. It's been accepted, but now it's less accepted. It's just it's painful to watch other industries dismantle their friction and have us still go through the same friction issues. So there's a long, boring answer to your question.
No. You'd asked me to ask this, so is there a canary in a coal mine that we should be, I guess, A, worried about, and then B, planning to take advantage of as an opportunity?
I mean, I think the canary in the coal mine is the other industries that have removed friction. Today, you can order online. You all know the order online, the Amazon story. You can rent a desk from WeWork and get a phenomenal experience. You can stay in a Brookfield Seiko lock apartment in London for about 1/3 of the price of a hotel room that is next door. The ease of access and use of the space, the shelter, is incredible outside of the rental and for sale business. And we do everything we can to prevent people from buying our houses, and I'm saying that facetiously, but candidly, we're open from 9 to 5. We don't greet you very nicely when you come in our sales office, and frankly, most consumers don't want to go in a sales office because it's uncomfortable for them to be greeted awfully by a salesperson. We make it incredibly difficult to get financed. We make it incredibly difficult to move, whether you're physically moving out of your own home or selling your home. No wonder mobility is down at the levels that it's down right now. There's a bunch of reasons for that, not least of which mortgage rates for the last 5 years have been lower than they are today. But it's just painful to move. Like, why aren't we as an industry making it phenomenally easy for you to move? Give us your house. We'll take it off your hands. Take the friction out, the iBuyer program. I think the iBuyer program is a potential canary in the coal mine.
To remove the friction.
Yeah.
And but that's an opportunity too, because
Massive.
It solves the contingency problem.
Exactly.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on. I know all 165 of those malls don't need to be redeveloped right now, but tell us where you're headed with that opportunity.
Yeah, so John said the company acquired General Growth and Rouse in the course of a sort of a 12-month, 15-month period, and assembled 165 or so malls. So that was one acquisition. On the back of that acquisition was a second with a company called Forest City, and Forest City was a sort of a Brookfield of sorts, a Brookfield Properties of sorts. They had an office business, a small retail business, had an apartment business, and a land development business in Stapleton, in Denver. And then just prior to that, a year prior to that, we bought a company in San Diego called Oliver Macmillan, with the single focus of really developing a business around, and I'm using my right hand here for purpose, a business around sort of mixed use apartment development, living development for rent. So we took the components of Forest City and Oliver Macmillan and unified them with some other Brookfield team members, and then set about working on some of those 165 malls. And in conjunction with Brookfield Retail, which is the former GGP company, who also have a development arm themselves, have sort of focused on the first tier of those malls. So roughly 10 or so of the malls, which are high profile, and you would know them, but just looking at re-energizing those malls and taking the million or so square feet of retail and maybe doubling it to be 2 million square feet, and maybe it's 1.5 million of something else and 500,000 of retail. So that simple concept is in the works. And I was using my hands because what we've got today is a land and housing business and a mixed use business. And our goal is to sort of bring those two businesses closer together so that in the center would be individuals or team members that can sort of cross over both sides, that can work on entitlement for land and housing and entitlement for mixed-use repositioned opportunities. And there's a whole series of that sort of shared service group in the middle that team members can work on both sides. The vision is that we're way more sustainable over the cycles of our land and housing business. We're way more attractive, frankly, to the talent that's out there in the marketplace, and we get to do great developments between the two businesses.
So can you describe one of those malls today, and then tell us with the tenants and what it's like, and then tell us what you think it'll be like 20 years from now?
Yeah, so there's one that's going to go in the ground the end of this year. It's called New Park Mall. It's in Newark, California. Most of you think of Newark as Newark, New Jersey. So it's a roughly 75-acre mall. It's ballpark 1 million square feet. They're all 1962 was a phenomenal year I was born. We must have built 100 malls in this country in 1962. They're all exactly the same. So 75 acres, 1 million square feet. It's got a Sears, it's got a JCPenney, it's got a Macy's, it's your classic mall. It's entitled now for 1,505 residential units, 400,000 square feet of office, a couple of hotel sites. Over a 12 to 15-year period, my view, it'll be maybe 300,000 square feet of retail, maybe at build out, and hopefully no one's here from Newark. It'll be 2,500 residential units. It'll be 500,000 square feet of office, and just this vibrant district of energy with everything from every shared living concept to multifamily housing to some for sale to some senior housing to a medical office facility to a phenomenal retail center. That's the dream.
So one last question, and I'll see if there's some from the audience, but what will happen to the parking there?
It's a great question. So we're doing some work at Brookfield. As you would imagine, we have quite an interest in what happens to autonomous vehicles and what happens to parking. So we're doing some work at Brookfield on purely on the retail side. What are the tenants saying they need, and what are we prepared to provide? So the old days, if Sandeep Mathrani were here, he's the CEO of Brookfield Retail, he would tell you that 10 years ago it was 5 per thousand. 5 years ago, it was 4 per thousand. Today, in most markets, it's between 3 and 4 per thousand stalls. So we're heading in the right direction. The only stalls that are used, and they've got a technology footprint that shows exactly where everyone parks. The only ones that are used are within 150 feet of the mall entries, and they know exactly who comes in and out. So really, we just need to get rid of everything else now, other than those that are roughly 150 feet. The next version of this is, we're driving less. We're Ubering to and from the mall. We're making driving, just a very small piece of the decision-making process when you think about going shopping or living in that mall. So ultimately, I would love to think it's going to 1 per thousand.
Okay. Any questions for Adrian? It's hard for me to see with the lights.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm from Atlanta. I work with Ashton Woods, and I'm sure you're familiar with Avalon.
Yes, I am.
So you think that it will be the future of the mall, a concept like Avalon?
The what, sorry?
Avalon in Alpharetta, outside of Atlanta. Are you familiar with this mall?
No, I'm not. No, give me the color.
And so basically it's like almost like a strip mall if you want, but there is a lot of community that come in. There is retail, multifamily, there is a single family home just behind, and it's just like 10 miles probably outside of the perimeter.
Yeah.
And they were able to increase like a rental of $5,000 per 3-bedroom, something that is insane if you think about you are so far from Atlanta downtown.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful place where you can bring your kids. They have like yesterday we walk on Woodlands, basically they have the same area where in winter they do like ice skating, so they bring family, bring kids, or in summer they do small concert or activities. And so it's not like anymore the classic mall.
That's right.
It was more like bring the community inside the mall. And so I was thinking if this would be the future for every mall in around the States or whatever.
I think that's certainly the theme. We actually banned the word mall in our design charrettes because the connotation of a mall is unfortunately not very positive. So I think it's just reinventing the space. The real estate is phenomenal. I haven't seen that, so I'll need to go pick it out. Yeah.
So there's your advice, ban the word mall. That's a good one. Okay, well, please join me in thanking Adrian for being here.